In this video, I'd like to talk about the concept of finding the slope of a line when you're given the equation. So this question asks, what is the slope of the line? And there are a couple different methods to approach this. First of all, remember that slope, m, is defined as our rise over our run for the line. And we also know that our slope-intercept form of the equation of a line is simply y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. So for instance, if we could get a line into the equation in slope-intercept form, so like y equals 2x minus 1, we can immediately identify the slope, since the slope is simply the coefficient on your x variable. So the number multiplied by your x variable. So in this case, the slope would be 2. So this is one approach we can take for this, try and solve it into our slope-intercept form. Now there's another way to approach this, because you might recognize this as the point-slope form for the equations of a line. So point-slope, remember, is simply y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And m here, again, is our slope. So notice, comparing this to this equation, since this is effectively in point-slope form, -2 would be the slope of this line. So D would be the answer. So you could compare it to your point-slope form, and in this case, if you know this, it's actually pretty quick to solve it. Or you can solve it for your slope-intercept form, and then whatever the coefficient on x is, that would be your slope. So let me do it the other way, just so that you can see that as well. So let me rewrite this as y plus 2 equals minus 2x minus 3. And the first step is distribution. So I got to get rid of those parentheses so that I can get y equals mx plus b and figure out the coefficient on x. So when I distribute, y plus 2 is minus 2 times x is just minus 2x. Minus 2 times minus 3 would be a positive 6. Two negatives cancel. And then I want to get y by itself, because notice we have this solve for y. So I have to subtract 2 on each side. And so I get that y is minus 2x plus 4, since 6 minus 2 is 4. And again, you can see the slope is -2, since the coefficient on x is always our slope. Remember from slope-intercept form right here. And in this case, the coefficient on x is -2. But that's what we found by just comparing it to point-slope. So this is actually a way that you can check your work, since we effectively use two different methods to come to the same conclusion. So let's try a different problem now. And this one is actually given in standard form, which is not super useful for us for finding the slope of a line. There are formulas you can memorize, but I prefer not to memorize formulas, so let's just think this through using basic principles. So 7x plus 2y equals 5. We want to put this into slope-intercept form so that we can figure out what the coefficient on x is. So essentially, we need to solve for y. And this always works. You can always just solve for y, and then whatever the coefficient on x is, the number multiplied by x, that's your slope. So this always works, though, like the question above, sometimes you can use point-slope. So to solve for y, we're going to move the x's to the other side. We're going to subtract 7x on each side so that these cancel each other out, so that we get 2y is minus 7x plus 5. I just put the x in front of our constant just to kind of match it up with this equation. But if you wrote 5 minus 7x, that'd be fine. You just have to recognize that at the end, the slope is attached to the x variable, not the constant. And lastly, since we need to get y by itself, we're going to have to cancel out this multiplication by 2, so we can do division. And remember, if you divide something or one side of the equation by a number, you have to divide the other side by that. But in reality, you end up dividing every term by that number. So if you multiply or divide on both sides of the equation, you have to do it to every single term. And 2 over 2, we know that's just 1. So you get that y is minus 7x over 2 plus 5 halves, or 2.5 if you want to write it like that. And our slope is the number attached to x. So it's going to be this minus 7 over 2. Which, as you can see, is choice letter C here. Now, if you want to memorize the formula, so this is the standard form where you have x, and actually this should be a y, so you have x and y on the same side of the equation. So this is one way to write lines. In fact, in this video we've gone through all three forms, the standard form, the slope-intercept form, and then from above you have the point-slope form. So those are the three forms of lines that you'll see, the most common ones. And from standard form, you can actually figure out the slope. It's just a formula. It's going to be minus a over b. And that will always give it to you, because notice that we took the opposite of a, so minus 7, and we divided it by b, which was 2, and we got minus 7 halves. So this can always work. If you have 3x plus 4y equals 10, you can immediately find that the slope is just the opposite of the coefficient on x, so minus 3, and then divided by the coefficient on y, which is 4. But in my opinion, it's better to just think this through from basic principles. Now, if you can rederive this slope formula from standard form by essentially taking this and solving for y, then you can feel free to use this formula. But if you just memorize this formula, that might lead to problems down the road. You always want to be able to get formulas back from basic principles. You want to know, where did this formula come from? And it essentially came from solving this for y, and then using slope-intercept form, the number attached to x would be minus a over b when you do solve for y. So anyways, let's do another problem. So again, we have standard form. You can use that formula, minus a over b, where that's a and that's b. And so you get minus 6 over 10, or minus 3/5. So that is the very fast way to solve these. But like I said, you want to be able to do it from basic principles. So what I mean by that is you want to be able to solve for y and then use slope-intercept form. Whatever the coefficient on x is, that's your slope. So let's subtract 6x on each side. And essentially here, we're just double checking that this does in fact give us the slope. So when we subtract 6x on each side, these cancel. We get 10y is minus 6x plus 8. I like putting the x's first because it matches up better with slope-intercept form, but you don't have to. And then lastly, I will cancel out the multiplication by 10 by using division. And we have to divide everything by 10. So this is just 1. We get that y is minus 6 over 10 times x plus 8 over 10, which is the same as 4/5. And so this is our slope right here. And we already know that it simplifies to minus 3/5. So our answer would be choice letter C here. And let's do another one. And this can be our last problem. So we need to solve this for y. That's really the only way forward with these problems if we don't have any like tricks or forms we can match it up to. So I'll just rewrite it. 3 parentheses y minus 1 equals 2x plus 2. And we want to distribute so that we can get y outside of the parentheses. Because our goal here, in fact, this is our goal for most of the problems, this is what you can always fall back on, is to figure out what y is equal to, and then compare to y equals mx plus b to figure out the coefficient on x, and whatever that is, that's our slope. So when we distribute, you get 3y minus 3. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, equals 2x plus 2. I want to solve for y, so I'm going to move the minus 3 over here. So I will add 3 to each side. And so I get that 3y is 2x plus 5. And lastly, to cancel out that multiplication by 3, I'm going to use division. So divide everything by 3. And with that, I get that y, since 3 over 3 is 1, so those cancel. So y is 2/3 times x plus 5/3. And so the coefficient on x, the number multiplied by x, is our slope. And in this case, it's the number 2/3. So choice letter A would be our final answer here.